They had planned the dinner as a quiet pause, the kind couples take when life becomes louder than love. He had suggested a small place near the river, a restaurant known for its warmth rather than its menu. His wife accepted the invitation with a fragile smile, hoping the evening would calm the unease that had grown between them over the last months. When they entered, the soft lighting and gentle laughter around the tables made the air feel almost protective. For a moment, she believed they could start again. They sat facing each other, trying to rediscover the rhythm that once came effortlessly. He asked about her day. She answered calmly, and neither mentioned the tension that had followed them like a long shadow. The waiter brought water and menus with a polite nod. Everything seemed ready for a peaceful evening. Then something shifted. His wife stopped speaking. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were trying to recognize a figure that should not exist in that room. He followed her gaze and felt his stomach tighten. A woman sat near the corner, half hidden by a tall candle. She had changed over the years, but the expression was unmistakable. His past rose in front of him with no warning. He blinked as if his sight betrayed him, but the woman was real. His wife stared at him, waiting for a sign that she was mistaken. He tried to lower his eyes, but the silence had already spoken. She understood before he said a word. The woman across the room looked up, as though pulled by the weight of the moment. Her eyes met his for a brief instant. He felt nothing romantic in that exchange, only the echo of a chapter he never wanted to revisit. His wife noticed the faint tension in his shoulders, a tension she had not seen in years. It was enough. She turned her face away, pretending to study the menu. The room, once warm and gentle, suddenly felt too small. He attempted to bring the evening back to normal, asking about a dish they used to share, but she did not respond. She placed her menu on the table and folded her hands slowly, as if choosing her next words carefully. Before she could speak, the waiter returned to take their order. She declined politely and asked for a few minutes. When the waiter stepped aside, she leaned forward and asked him how long it had been since he last saw the woman in the corner. He told her the truth. Many years. Yet the honesty did not lighten the air. It only confirmed what she feared. He still carried pieces of that story inside him. The woman across the room seemed aware of the tension her presence had created. She finished her drink quickly and placed her payment on the table. Before leaving, she glanced in their direction once more. This time, the look was brief and filled with something close to regret. His wife watched the exchange with a calm expression that hid storm. When the woman left, the door behind her closed with a soft sound that felt much louder than it should have. He reached for her hand, but she moved it away gently. She did not cause a scene. She did not raise her voice. Instead, she asked for the bill with surprising composure. The moment the waiter stepped away, she leaned closer. Her voice was soft, controlled, and frighteningly clear. She told him they needed to talk and that the conversation could not happen here. The evening was no longer about dinner. It had become the beginning of a truth she was finally ready to confront. The bill was still on the table when she whispered that they needed to talk somewhere no one could hear them. They walked out of the restaurant without touching each other. The night was cool, silent, and heavy with thoughts neither knew how to express. She moved ahead of him with steady steps, not fast enough to seem angry, but firm enough to show she needed space. He followed slowly, aware that words would only make things worse at this stage. She waited until they reached the parking lot before turning to him with an expression he could not read. Her silence became the loudest sound he had heard in months. Inside the car, she buckled her seatbelt and stared through the windshield as if the road ahead contained the answer to everything she feared. He started the engine, hoping the movement would soften the tension, but she raised her hand gently, signaling him to wait. She finally broke the silence by asking how long he had known his former partner was back in town. He told her he did not know at all. She listened, but her eyes stayed fixed on the night outside, absorbing each word with cautious attention. She asked why the relationship with that woman ended. He tried to explain without reopening wounds he believed had healed long ago. She did not interrupt him once. When he finished, she kept her gaze forward and asked why he never spoke about certain details she had discovered on her own. The questions were not angry. They were deliberate and painfully specific. He was surprised by the accuracy of her knowledge, realizing she understood more about his past than he had ever shared. When she finally turned to look at him, her expression carried no hint of jealousy. Her voice was calm when she said she did not fear the presence of the other woman. She feared the version of him who had existed before their marriage. A man who once loved intensely and lost heavily. She worried that the part of him shaped by that heartbreak still lived in silence beneath the surface, and that he had never truly allowed her to know that part of himself. He tried to reassure her, but she continued speaking with a clarity that left no room for interruption. She explained the subtle changes she had observed over the past months. Moments when he drifted into thought without reason. Evenings when he avoided certain topics. The quiet sadness behind his eyes when he believed she was not watching. She described these observations not as accusations, but as truth she could no longer ignore. The car, still in the parking lot, felt like an intimate chamber where memories, fears, and half-spoken truths collided. He realized she had not been searching for information about the other woman. She had been searching for him, the real man behind the silence. The man she had sensed withdrawing from her even before that unexpected encounter inside the restaurant. As he struggled to find the right words, she leaned back in her seat and exhaled slowly. She explained that she wanted to know who he had been before her, not to compare herself to anyone, but to honor the life he lived before their paths crossed. She said that seeing his former partner revealed a truth she had avoided confronting. She had never asked him enough. She had never invited him to share the parts of his history he kept hidden out of habit rather than mistrust. He felt something inside him shift with her words. The emptiness he carried with him, the silence he believed was protection, now felt like a barrier he never meant to build. She spoke again, softer this time, telling him that the real danger was not the woman they saw at dinner. The real danger was the distance he had created without realizing it. He turned off the engine to face her fully. The night around them stayed still, but inside the car the air vibrated with emotion. They looked at each other and felt the weight of everything unspoken settle between them. The engine was off, but the questions kept burning. When he reached for the gear shift, she placed her hand over his with a quiet firmness that startled him. She told him that they were not going home yet. She needed air. She needed space that did not carry the weight of walls or memories. He agreed without hesitation, sensing that refusing her now would close a door he could never reopen. They stepped out of the car and began walking toward a nearby path illuminated by soft lights. The night carried a cold breeze that wrapped around them like a silent witness. She walked slightly ahead, her arms folded across her chest as if she were holding herself together. He followed close behind, waiting for her to speak. The gravel beneath their feet created a slow rhythm that seemed to accompany her rising thoughts. When she finally turned to him, her expression held both sadness and determination. She told him she had seen changes in him long before this evening. Changes he never acknowledged and she never confronted. A distance he had not noticed he created. A hesitation that appeared whenever she tried to get close. Even a smile that once lit up his face but had quietly disappeared. He tried to respond, but she lifted her hand gently, asking him to let her finish. She walked a few steps forward and looked at the sky as if searching for the strength to continue. She confessed that she had lived with an unspoken fear. Not a fear of the woman they saw at dinner. Not a fear of betrayal. She feared losing him to something far more subtle. She feared losing him to a slow fading of himself. She feared watching him move through life as if carrying a burden she could not name. He stood beside her, feeling the truth of her words settle heavily on his shoulders. She explained that she had noticed him withdrawing in small ways. He came home tired, but said nothing. He smiled politely, but without warmth. He answered questions with the minimum necessary to keep conversations alive. She had waited for him to share something, anything, but the silence grew instead. She had convinced herself that the change was temporary until the weeks became months, and she realized it was becoming part of him. He felt a mix of guilt and confusion. He had never intended to shut her out. He had simply learned to keep his own struggles quiet. He believed silence protected her. She believed silence isolated them both. They continued walking, the cold air brushing against their faces, carrying away the words that felt too heavy to hold. She stopped near a bench and sat down slowly. He sat beside her, unsure of what would come next. She looked straight ahead, her voice softer now as she admitted something he never expected to hear. She confessed that she had been afraid of losing him not to another woman, but to life itself. She feared he was slipping into a place where stress and unspoken worries were shaping him more than love and connection. She feared waking up one day to find him present in body, but absent in spirit. He listened with a tightness in his chest. He had never imagined she carried these fears alone. The night felt colder as the truth settled around them. She reached in her coat with slow, deliberate movement. He watched her hand disappear inside the fabric, unaware of what she was searching for. When her hand emerged, she held an envelope. It looked worn from being handled repeatedly, as if she had carried it for some time. She placed the envelope on her lap without opening it. Her voice trembled when she said she had hoped never to show it to him, but tonight left her no choice. The weight of it rested between them like a sealed answer to questions he did not know he had asked. And then she reveals the envelope she had been hiding in her coat. She placed the envelope in his hands with a gentleness that felt more devastating than anger. He looked at her with confusion, unsure of what he was holding or why her expression carried such controlled sadness. The silence around them felt heavier than the night air. When he finally opened the envelope, a single sheet slid out. His name appeared at the top of the page in bold letters. The rest of the text blurred slightly as his breath caught in his throat. It was a medical report he had hidden in a drawer he believed she never touched. He stared at the paper, unable to speak. She sat very still beside him, her hands clasped on her lap as if bracing herself for what he would try to explain. He asked how she found it. She told him she had been searching for a scarf, and the paper slipped out from a pile of documents he had not organized. At first, she thought it belonged to someone else. When she lifted it and saw his name clearly printed, her world shifted. She sat on the edge of their bed, reading every line with growing dread. It explained the weight loss he insisted was due to stress. It explained the faintness he claimed was from skipped meals. It explained the fatigue he tried to laugh off. Every excuse he gave was now exposed as a quiet attempt to hide something far more serious. He tried to speak, but she continued before he could form a sentence. She said she waited for days, then weeks, hoping he would choose to share the truth himself. She had rehearsed gentle ways to bring up the subject, hoping to avoid causing him shame. She watched him every morning, searching for signs that he might be ready to talk. Instead, she saw him retreat further into himself. She had planned to wait a little longer, thinking that patience would bring clarity. But tonight had changed something inside her. Seeing his former partner in the restaurant made her heart jolt in a way she did not expect. Not because she felt threatened, not because she believed he wanted to reconnect. She saw something in his face that frightened her. A reflexive tension that felt like a man preparing for an impact. A man who had lived through emotional wounds he never healed. She realized he had been protecting her again, not from a person, but from the truth of his own weakened health. She confessed that for weeks she feared he was preparing a soft exit from their life. She imagined him distancing himself so she would feel less pain when the truth eventually emerged. She believed he was pushing her away not because he stopped loving her, but because he wanted to spare her a future filled with worry. That fear, she said, kept her awake many nights. She studied every gesture he made, searching for signs of goodbye hidden in ordinary moments. He listened with growing ache. He never intended to make her feel abandoned. He thought staying silent would protect her from stress. He believed he could handle the situation alone until it passed. He never considered that silence itself could become a wound. As she spoke, he felt the weight of his choices settle over him. She had carried fears that were never hers to carry. She looked at him with eyes that held equal parts love and disappointment. She said she did not need perfection or strength. She needed honesty. She needed to know the man she loved trusted her enough to let her stand beside him in fear as well as in comfort. Her voice trembled when she admitted that seeing him face his past so suddenly made her realize how distant he had become in the present. The truth was worse. He had not left her. He had hidden everything from her. He opened his mouth to speak, ready to explain the silence that had shaped the last months of their life, when a sudden vibration broke the moment. Her phone rang inside her coat, sharp and unexpected in the stillness of the night. She glanced at the screen and frowned. The number was unfamiliar. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. The evening already carried more weight than she could handle. Yet something in the timing felt too precise to dismiss. She answered with cautious politeness, her breath forming a small cloud in the cold air. At first, she heard nothing. Then a faint voice whispered her name. She straightened slowly, recognizing the tone before she recognized the person. His former partner had called her. Not him. Her. She stood up from the bench with a sudden stiffness, pressing the phone closer to her ear. He watched her expression shift from confusion to disbelief. She asked why the woman was calling her. The answer came in a trembling voice that carried a mixture of urgency and exhaustion. The former partner explained she had seen them earlier at the restaurant and had been debating whether to intervene. She insisted she was not calling out of nostalgia or jealousy. She said she needed to speak with the wife privately because something serious needed to be addressed. Something she had carried alone for years. Something she believed could no longer remain hidden. Her tone was fragile, as if the weight of her confession had grown unbearable. The wife asked her what she meant. The woman hesitated, struggling to form a sentence. She said the matter concerned him directly. She said she feared he might be facing consequences from choices he never knew were made on his behalf. She admitted that her silence had created a chain of events neither of them could fully understand. The wife felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold night. She covered her mouth with her hand, realizing the call was not about emotions from the past, but a truth that seemed tied to the man sitting beside her. He moved closer, trying to hear the fragments of the conversation. She stepped aside, torn between respecting privacy and feeling protective. The woman on the phone repeated that they must speak tonight. She insisted the matter could not wait until morning. Every word deepened the tension. The wife asked why she had not come to him directly. The woman explained that she feared he would refuse to listen and that the wife needed the information even if he did not want to face it. The wife lowered the phone briefly and looked at him. Her expression held no anger, only a deep concern shaped by everything she had already learned tonight. She returned the phone to her ear and asked where the meeting should take place. The woman named a small cafe near the river that stayed open late. The wife listened carefully, noticing how the woman's voice trembled when she spoke of the urgency. When the call ended, she let the phone drop in her hand as if it had suddenly become too heavy. He asked who it was and why she looked so pale. She told him the truth, quietly. His former partner wanted to speak with her. Not later. Now. He frowned, unsure whether this was manipulation or genuine concern. She explained that the woman sounded distressed. She said the information involved him. She said it was not optional. He took a slow breath, feeling old memories stirring again. This night had already unearthed enough pain for a month. Yet he sensed that refusing would create more questions than answers. The wife looked at him with newfound resolve. She said they would not be meeting this woman alone. They would go together. She refused to carry another secret or allow anyone to speak about him without his presence. The wife says they will both go. The cafe stood at the edge of the river, half hidden by tall trees and dim outdoor lamps. Inside, only a few tables were occupied, mostly by people absorbed in quiet conversations. The warm glow of the interior contrasted sharply with the tension that accompanied them through the door. His former partner sat near the back, her hands wrapped around a cup she had not touched. When she looked up, he saw no trace of the confident woman he once knew. Her posture was tense, and her eyes carried the tired heaviness of someone who had rehearsed a confession too many times. His wife took the seat beside him, placing herself slightly forward as if prepared to shield him from whatever this meeting would reveal. The woman across the table offered a faint greeting before lowering her gaze again. She apologized for the late hour and the sudden call. She explained that she had tried to approach them outside the restaurant, but could not bring herself to face him without warning. She admitted she had struggled for years with a secret she should have revealed long before they went their separate ways. He folded his hands on the table, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath and said that during the final months of their relationship, she made a decision that changed the course of his life without his knowledge. She said she believed she was protecting him, although now she understood she had only been protecting herself. His wife leaned slightly closer, sensing the seriousness behind every word. The woman explained that before they separated, he had been offered an opportunity that could have altered his future. It had come through a mutual acquaintance who reached out while he was away one weekend. The offer required an immediate response. She was supposed to pass along the message. Instead, she remained silent. She confessed she feared the opportunity would take him to another city and make her irrelevant. She believed that if he never received the news, he would remain with her. She later realized that fear had clouded her judgment and caused her to interfere with a life path that was not hers to shape. He stared at her in disbelief. The revelation struck him deeper than he expected. His wife watched him carefully, seeing the confusion and hurt settle into his expression. The woman admitted she had carried guilt ever since. She said she often wondered how different his life might have been if she had simply told him the truth. She said she feared that coming forward now would feel like reopening wounds, yet remaining silent had become unbearable. His wife spoke for the first time, asking quietly why she never revealed this earlier. The woman answered that pride and shame had built a wall she did not know how to dismantle. She said she believed he had moved on and that her confession would only bring unnecessary pain. Tonight, however, when she saw him in the restaurant, the weight of her silence overwhelmed her. She realized he deserved the truth no matter how late it arrived. He leaned back in his chair, processing the impact of the moment. The opportunity she described had been something he once dreamed of but never believed he had missed. His wife placed her hand on his arm, grounding him gently. She understood now that this meeting was not about old emotions or jealousy. It was about bringing clarity to a man whose past had been altered without his knowledge. It was about freeing him from an invisible narrative he never had the chance to question. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. She placed it on the table with trembling fingers. She said it contained something he once gave her during a hopeful moment in their relationship. She believed returning, it was the final step in releasing the past. He refused to touch it. The small box sat between them like an unwelcome guest. He hesitated to touch it, but his wife encouraged him with a quiet nod. The ex watched with nervous hands folded tightly together. When he finally opened the lid, he found a single folded letter resting inside. The sight of his own handwriting made his breath hitch. He picked it up slowly, unfolding the paper that had yellowed slightly with age. His wife leaned closer, sensing that whatever he was about to discover would reshape the night even more than the confession they had already heard. He began reading in silence. The words were his, yet they felt like they belonged to a stranger he barely remembered. He had written them during a period marked by disappointment and confusion. Emotions he thought he had outgrown returned with force. The letter described fears he had never spoken aloud. Fear of failure. Fear of not being enough for the person he loved at the time. Fear that his dreams were slipping away and that he was slowly becoming invisible. He had written about sleepless nights and the pressure of expectations that felt heavier than anything he had admitted to anyone. His wife watched his expression shift from surprise to sorrow. She placed her hand on his for the first time since dinner, grounding him through the storm rising behind his eyes. The connection eased the tension in his shoulders. He continued reading, feeling a deep ache with each line. He had forgotten how lost he once felt. He had buried these emotions beneath years of responsibilities and silence. Seeing them again made him confront a part of himself he believed had vanished. The ex spoke softly, explaining that she found the letter after their breakup. At first she intended to return it, but when she read it, she felt overwhelmed by the pain between the sentences. She said she believed that giving it back then would only hurt him more. She convinced herself that hiding it was an act of mercy. She kept it in a drawer for years, hoping time would erase the guilt she carried. Yet every time she saw his handwriting, she remembered the man who once trusted her with his vulnerability. He looked up from the letter, confused by the contradiction. She apologized with a trembling voice, admitting that she had not spared him anything. Instead, she had deepened wounds he never knew he had. She said the letter revealed a version of him that deserved support, not silence. She feared confronting the reality of what he felt about himself. She believed she was protecting him, but she now understood that fear had guided every wrong choice she made. His wife listened closely, her hand still holding his. She had never seen him shaken like this. The letter revealed a fragility he had never shared with her. She felt her heart tighten as she realized how long he had carried the habit of hiding his struggles. She saw clearly now that his recent silence was not new. It was a continuation of a pattern forged years before they met. A pattern shaped by moments like the one contained in the letter he held. He placed the paper back inside the box, closing it slowly as if closing the door to a painful memory. The ex whispered another apology, insisting she had never meant for this secret to shape his life the way it had. She wanted him to reclaim a part of himself he never knew was altered by her choices. She wanted him to leave this cafe tonight with a truth he finally owned. His wife looked at the ex with calm strength. She understood the weight of the revelation, yet one question still pressed against her thoughts. She leaned forward, studying the woman across from her with steady eyes. Then his wife asked the ex one final question that changed the tone of the night. The cafe had grown quieter. Only the faint hum of a distant coffee machine broke the stillness. His wife watched the ex with a gaze that held neither anger nor rivalry. It held something sharper, a need for truth without decoration. She leaned forward, her fingers interlaced on the table, and asked the question that froze the air between them. She asked why the woman had really approached them, why she had chosen this night, why she had waited so long, why now, after years of silence and regret. The ex inhaled shakily, as if the answer had lived inside her chest for too long. She looked down at the small box on the table, then lifted her eyes to meet the wife's unwavering stare. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. She pressed her hands together to steady herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was fragile but honest. She said she had not approached them out of desire to reconcile or revisit old emotions. She had come because she saw something at the restaurant she could not ignore. His wife asked what she meant. The ex closed her eyes briefly, gathering the strength to continue. She explained that when she looked at him, she recognized an expression she had hoped never to see again. It was not nostalgia. It was not longing. It was a quiet pain that lived behind the eyes of someone who carried too much alone. She said she had seen that same look years ago when their relationship was collapsing under the weight of unspoken uncertainty. She remembered how he had withdrawn into himself, believing he needed to protect everyone except his own heart. The wife listened without interrupting. She felt her stomach tighten as the woman continued. The ex said that she watched him at the restaurant, sitting across from the wife he loved, yet wearing the same invisible exhaustion he once wore with her. It frightened her. It reminded her of the nights when he had pretended everything was fine while slowly disappearing inside his thoughts. She said she realized the past was unfolding again, not because of infidelity or old wounds, but because his silence had returned in the same form as before. He lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. His wife looked at him with growing worry. The ex continued, explaining that she saw a man who was no longer fully present in his own life. She recognized the signs because she had lived through the consequences of missing them once. She said she felt a responsibility to speak now, before history repeated itself in a marriage that could still be saved. She believed the wife still had the chance to reach him before the silence pushed them apart. The room felt smaller. The shadows around them deepened as the truth expanded. His wife's breath caught as she processed what the woman had observed. All the small changes she had noticed over the past months suddenly connected like pieces of a puzzle. The hesitations, the fatigue, the distance he tried to hide. She realized she had been sensing the same shift, but had not known how to confront it until tonight forced everything into the open. He sat motionless, absorbing the revelation with a heaviness that pressed against his chest. The ex watched him with genuine sorrow, admitting she did not want her past mistakes to echo into his present life. She said she hoped the wife could intervene where she once failed. Her voice trembled as she apologized for speaking out of turn, but insisted she could not remain silent when she recognized emotional collapse in its earliest form. The wife pushed her chair back slowly. She stood with trembling hands, her eyes fixed on her husband. She told him they were leaving immediately. They entered the house without exchanging a single word. The silence between them felt different now. Not hostile, not cold, heavy in a purposeful way, as if both carried a truth they were finally ready to face. She walked ahead of him, removed her coat with calm precision, and turned on the lights. The brightness filled the room, revealing the tension in her posture. She pointed to the chair across from her and asked him to sit. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, but carried an authority he had not heard in months. He obeyed, sensing this moment was not born from anger. Something deeper guided her. She remained standing, looking at him with an expression that blended sadness and determination. She told him that most of what he had said tonight did not surprise her. She had known long before the dinner, long before the envelope and the confession, long before the meeting at the cafe. She had noticed the changes in him before he noticed them himself. He frowned, confused by how much she seemed to know. She walked toward the table, placed her hands on its surface, and explained that she had never spied on him. She had never searched through messages or invaded his privacy. Instead, she had watched with the care of someone who had built a life beside a partner she loved. She saw his fatigue grow into withdrawal. She saw his smile fade into politeness. She saw his thoughts drift away during conversations. She saw the fight in him weaken, even though he pretended everything was fine. She had confronted herself first, wondering if she had done something wrong. But the deeper she looked, the more she realized his struggle had nothing to do with her. It came from a place he had not shared, a place he had learned to hide long before they met. She admitted she had cried alone some nights, not from rejection, but from helplessness. She feared pushing him. She feared losing him. She feared watching him fade inside a silence that grew heavier each week. So she did something she had never told him. She studied his days, watched his habits, and quietly pieced together clues he unintentionally left behind. She learned the pattern of his exhaustion. She recognized the signs of stress he refused to admit. She understood the pauses he could not explain. It was not surveillance. It was protection. She needed to know what she was fighting against before she could help him. He looked at her in disbelief, moved by the depth of her effort. She continued speaking with calm strength. She said she created a plan to save their marriage and to save him from the quiet storm he carried alone. She did not want to embarrass him. She did not want to confront him in anger. She wanted to understand the root of his silence and rebuild their connection with intention rather than panic. She had waited for the right moment, the moment when truth and love could stand in the same room without fear. Tonight had given her that moment. She moved around the table and knelt in front of him, her eyes level with his. She told him that everything revealed tonight, every confession and every truth, only confirmed what she already suspected. She was not losing him to someone else. She was losing him to the weight he refused to share. She said she was done watching him disappear behind a wall he never meant to build. Her voice softened as she placed her hand on his chest, right above his heart. She said she was ready to begin the plan she had crafted, not out of desperation, out of love that refused to give up on him. Then she said the sentence that breaks him open. She knelt before him with a calmness that struck him harder than any outburst could have. Her hands rested lightly on his knees as she searched his face with an expression that revealed both strength and vulnerability. He waited for anger or disappointment, yet neither appeared. Instead, she spoke with a quiet clarity that pierced through every defense he had spent years constructing. She told him she was not afraid of his past. She was not afraid of the illness he had tried to hide. She was afraid of losing the man who carried everything alone, the man who pushed through storms without letting anyone hold the umbrella with him. The sentence cut through him. It was not an accusation. It was a plea. She said she wanted to rebuild with him, not around him. She wanted a partnership where the burden was shared, not masked behind polite smiles and half-truths. She reminded him that marriage was not a performance. It was a place where fear should be safe to land. She lifted his chin gently, so he could not look away, and repeated that she did not need explanations. She needed him to stop walking through his life as if she did not exist beside him. He felt something shift inside his chest, a pressure he had ignored for too long. She continued speaking, her voice steady and warm. She said she understood why he had hidden things. She understood the instinct to protect others from pain. She even understood the habit of shrinking in his silence when life became too heavy. But she would no longer accept being treated as a spectator to the struggles of the man she loved. She wanted to walk with him, even if the road was uneven. She gave him a choice, but not with an ultimatum. She offered it with sincerity that left him breathless. She told him he could let her in, or he could let the silence win. She said the silence had already taken too much from them both. It had stolen moments of tenderness. It had erased laughter from their evenings. It had pushed them into separate corners of the same home. She refused to let it take anything more. Her words broke through all the layers he had built around his emotions. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. They came slowly at first, then gathered with an intensity he could not control. He tried to wipe them away, embarrassed by the rawness of the moment, but she stopped his hand and allowed the emotion to flow. He cried not from weakness, but from surrender. It was the release of a man who had carried too much for too long without admitting he needed help. She moved closer and rested her forehead against his. She whispered that she had not married a perfect man and never expected one. She married a man with strength and flaws, hopes and fears, victories and quiet battles. She did not want explanations about the past or promises for the future. She only wanted presence. She wanted honesty. She wanted him. Not the version he polished for the world, but the man who now sat before her with tears on his cheeks and truth in his eyes. He wrapped his arms around her slowly, holding her as if rediscovering a language he had forgotten. The warmth of her embrace grounded him in a way he had not felt in years. In that moment, he realized her strength had protected them both when his silence threatened to unravel everything. He understood now that she had not been waiting for answers. She had been waiting for him. Their breathing synchronized, filling the room with a fragile peace. He believed the night had given them all the revelations they could handle. But the night has one more twist waiting. The morning light crept into the living room with a softness that contrasted sharply with the intensity of the night before. He woke slowly, expecting to find her beside him, but the space next to him was empty. For a moment, panic rose in his chest. Then he noticed a single sheet of paper resting on the table near the window. His name was written in her handwriting. He reached for it with trembling fingers, unsure of what the message contained. When he unfolded the letter, the tension in his shoulders eased. It was not a farewell. It was a beginning. She had written with a clarity that surprised him. She said the silence of the past months had become a wall she refused to allow in their future. She described a plan built not from fear, but from hope. Therapy sessions where they would speak openly, without shame or hesitation. New routines designed to protect his health and restore his energy. A commitment to communication that would replace distance with presence. Medical support that would ensure he no longer carried the burden alone. She had mapped out each step with steady conviction, as if she had been preparing this moment long before he realized he needed it. He read each line slowly, absorbing the intention woven into her words. The letter did not blame him. It did not dwell on past mistakes. It focused on the path ahead, a path she insisted on walking beside him. She wrote that marriage was not defined by passion alone. It was defined by the quiet courage to rebuild when life demanded renewal. She reminded him that the night had revealed truths neither of them expected. Yet those truths had opened a door they could finally walk through together. He paused at the paragraph where she spoke about the meeting at the cafe. She admitted that hearing the ex speak had stirred emotions she did not expect, but none of those emotions were rooted in rivalry. She wrote that when she saw the woman looking at him across the restaurant, she felt no urge to compete. She did not see a threat. She saw a reminder of something essential. Love must be protected, not assumed. It must be nurtured, not simply remembered. That moment, she said, awakened something powerful inside her. It reminded her that the bond they shared needed attention and honesty, not avoidance. He continued reading until he reached the final lines. Her words were simple, but carried the weight of the entire night. She wrote that their marriage had not been weakened by the presence of the past. It had been strengthened by the truth that emerged from it. She believed that the moment he allowed himself to be vulnerable was the moment they stepped into a more authentic version of their life together. She promised that she would stay, not because she was bound by vows, but because she chose him again. She chose the man she saw beneath the silence. His eyes lingered on the last sentence. She wrote that the night did not destroy their marriage. It rebuilt it with truth. The simplicity of a statement moved him more than any dramatic declaration could have. He folded the letter carefully, holding it against his chest as if anchoring himself to the promise it carried. He looked around the quiet room with a sense of rebirth. The story had begun with uncertainty and fear, but it did not end with the ex or with regret. It ended with the man he became when his wife chose to stay.